Hello, and welcome to Cahnmann's Current Events Roundtable. Today we have a guest that knows everything about what's happening in Washington. Knows all the secrets and how the debt ceiling is going to turn out. She knows everything. She's an amazing guest, and I want to tell you a little bit about her. Her name is Julie Strauss, and she received her doctorate in American politics. Her dissertation examined the unique role women members of Congress have had on public policy. She had spent 2 years on Capitol Hill working for elected officials and has been a popular lecturer in American politics in the Chicagoland area, and brings both academic experience and real-world experience to her lectures. Welcome, Julie. I'm so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
And what is going on in American politics today? We really need you because I can't figure it out, and I wonder if anybody else can. I wanted to read a little just something from the New York Times, and it was quoting a Mark Zandi, who is chief economist at Moody Analytics. He's a chief exam at Moody's Analytics, and I don't know where that is, but maybe other people do know. But he is supposed to be very well thought of as a chief economist. And he said that the imminence of a possible default was already damaging the U.S.'s standing as the most credit-worthy country in the world. The tarnished reputation may linger even if the government reaches a deal, and especially if the country's financial books remain unbalanced. He also quoted and said, "Our aura is diminished. You know, people really view as a AAA the gold standard, and I think we're tarnishing that." Tell me, Julie, how much damage has already been done with what's happening with the debt ceiling?
Well, I think that you could certainly say a little bit of damage is happening when you hear the ratings agencies threatening to lower the credit rating, which would have an immediate result in increase in interest rates. I believe, though, that if a deal is reached in the next few days, that even is a patchwork or some kind of a fail-safe that gets everybody over the deadline, that the damage would probably be more short-term and temporary, but it certainly would raise the specter of more issues along these lines the next time these kinds of debates come up and the next time the debt ceiling comes up.
My understanding, Julie, that this is the first time we have ever had a debt ceiling crisis that has come out in public like this. Maybe they talk about it. I'm sure other presidents, both Democrat and Republican, have had some issues, but it's always been sort of hidden from the public. We don't know about it. Why has this one come out in public, and what is this all about? I don't understand why it's been so extreme, and why haven't we heard about this before, and why is something like this happening?
Well, a big question that I can answer by starting by saying that you're absolutely right. This has been a very routine vote that has happened year after year after year, I believe, since Eisenhower, and that presidents, both Republicans and Democrats, have signed debt ceiling increases. And what is important to understand is that this is simply a pro forma measure to allow the United States to borrow some money to pay its existing bills. It is not new money that it will then spend on new programs. This is to pay the interest on the debt, to pay for Social Security, et cetera, the bills that it is obligated to pay as appropriated by Congress. The reason that it's becoming an issue this cycle is because with the new Republican majority in the House, they have started...
And you're talking more of the Tea Party group?
Well, partly the Tea Party, but just the fact that the Republicans, yes, who control now the House of Representatives, and many of whom did run saying they were going to cut spending and that was going to be their top priority, almost immediately after the election spoke about the debt ceiling increase being a big issue because they do not want to vote to support to incur more debt for the United States. And as this became more and more clear, Obama and members on Capitol Hill formed commissions to try to tackle how could we reduce our deficit, how can we lower the debt, seeing this vote looming and saying, well, if we're going to have trouble just getting a clean vote, simply we will extend the debt, up or down vote, nothing else attached. That wasn't going to happen, that these Republicans in the House would not vote for that. They started to say, well, then let's tackle cutting the deficit, cutting the long-term debt as part of getting a debt ceiling extension. So that's why the pressure is on right now on this particular piece of legislation.
Well, how do we allow the debt to get so high? I mean, during the Clinton era, he was able to control it. And what do you think it was all the wars that we've been having? You know, from starting from Iraq to Afghanistan to Libya. You know, all these wars that we're in, 3 wars, 4 wars. I mean, every time I look, there's another war going on. I mean, do you think this has been the culprit, or is it or Medicare, or they keep talking about the Medicare and Social Security, but what really was the culprit that started this?
Well, that's several things I can list right off the bat, and 2 of them are absolutely right. The wars, the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan, were not funded with new revenue raised. They were funded out of the current budget. Then there was the Medicare Plan B drug extension that was passed, and the Bush tax cuts were also part of adding to the deficit. And then came the stimulus package that Obama has passed, and all of those things wrapped together give you many trillions of dollars in debt. And the deficit, which we should be clear, what's the difference between the deficit and the debt?
Yeah, we'd like to explain that to our audience because I think that is something that they need to know.
Okay, well, the debt it's a very simple difference. The debt is every penny owed by the United States from the beginning that the United States has borrowed any money. So the debt is at about 14.3, I believe, trillion dollars. The deficit is how much we borrow every year, and so that adds into the debt. Now, deficits.
We're talking about borrowing. You're talking about we're borrowing not only from our treasury, but we're also borrowing, like say, from places like China and other countries. So the borrowing isn't just from our own banks and our own accounts.
Right. And actually, I read recently a statistic: 40% of every dollar spent is borrowed, but not. Some of that is borrowed in the sense that people are buying treasury bills or pensions funds are investing in treasury. That's borrowed money, but those are Americans who are holding those securities. So the deficit for many years has been in the hundreds of billions of dollar range, which was more comfortable or palatable to most people. But when Obama took office and the big recession that we were experiencing, they added almost $1 trillion in stimulus spending. That bumped the deficit, that 1-year measurement, up to over $1 trillion.
Was it the mortgages too?
All the packages, the bailouts, the TARP, all of that added to this deficit. So what has become alarming to a lot of people is that the deficits are now in the $1 trillion range.
Yeah, how are we going to pay it back?
Not just the debt.
Yes, I mean, it's like, I know when we talked earlier, I remember my own parents, they would never buy something unless they had the money to pay for it. I mean, in those days we didn't have credit cards, and you didn't purchase anything unless you had the money. And if you borrowed something, you would pay it back. But how could we pay back all of this? And if we don't pay it back, like say we owe China so much money right now, and if we don't pay it back, what's going to happen?
Well, that's where you get to this default issue. I mean, we will be able to pay it back over time as scheduled if they extend the debt ceiling so that the United States can borrow more money. And the reason that the United States can borrow the money is because it has this AAA rating that it will pay it back on time, it pays its bills. By even threatening default, raising or risking our credit rating going down, interest rates will go up because they will say it's going to cost, we're not as confident that you'll pay it back, we should charge you more money to borrow money.
So you're saying that if we go into default and we can't pay our bills and we don't get this debt ceiling taken care of, and say we need to borrow more money from China, they're going to even charge us a lot more interest because
Potentially. That's a potential
and then we'll
issue.
Then we'll be in a situation we'll never pay back anything. It's going to be horrible. And I'm surprised that other countries, if we don't go into default, how will they really want to lend to the United States?
Well, that's a question that people are asking right now. I do still believe, as the leaders in Washington are saying, we will get a deal, and that this will be something that they are working on not having this issue, and at least that's Obama's position, come up again for at least through the end of 2012.
Okay, now he wants it in 2013.
Right.
And the Republican Party wants it 2012. They want to give them 1 year of leadway, where Obama wants it 2 years.
Or 18 months,
or
right,
18 months.
Exactly.
And one of the reasons being that he wants it because there's election coming on, and he doesn't want to be stuck with, he wants to be talking more about jobs than he does about the debt ceiling. But as you said, the Republicans would like him to talk more about the debt ceiling, less about the jobs, and the jobs are what American people are really concerned about. We're not as concerned about when the debt ceiling and the debts and all that. American people, they don't have jobs. They're losing their homes, their mortgages, and they're more concerned about jobs, which was promised to the people, that there would be better jobs and more jobs coming in and people starting to work again, and yet Obama can't get around to it because of this debt ceiling debate.
Well, I think that Obama's strategy is this spring he realized with a divided government, which we are now, which he is dealing with, the best way to get back on his message of job creation, which he realizes, and I think all Democrats realize needs to be at the top of their agenda to help them win, increase their majority in the House, or win back some of their seats in the House, perhaps widen their majority in the Senate, and help Obama get reelected, is to say, we understand, we hear you on the deficit to the Republicans. We acknowledge that spending is out of control, absolutely. We want to work to get these deficits down, and that here is our best deal. And this is something that some of the deals that you have seen come out in the last several weeks have been extremely large. To think about $1 trillion in spending cuts, entitlement reforms to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. These are the core of the Democratic Party, and that the idea that Obama is negotiating on these, and that with the understanding that he would get his party to support that.
Especially the left part of his party is never going to support that, because that's what their issues are.
But if they were able to...
The conservative part of the Democratic Party, you have to remember they're very left-wing, and there's middle, and more right of the same party.
Absolutely.
And also there's a divided party going on in the Republican Party as well. You have the traditional Republicans, and you have the very conservative Republicans. And it's a divide. You mentioned the word divided. How are they going to come to any kind of compromise or with such a divided government?
Well, I think that's a very good question. What I wanted to point out is that the package that had been put together was extremely, made everybody unhappy, or a lot of people unhappy in the Democratic Party, and yet the Republicans, a lot of them balked at that, did not want that package because it contained some revenue increases and closing of some loopholes. But some people have said to them, you should have taken that deal. You wouldn't have gotten it. That was the best deal. Plus, you would have some Democratic cover because the Democrats would, in the end, probably vote for it while holding their noses, but realizing they need to get the debt ceiling taken care of and have some deficit reduction and clear the way to allow Obama and the Democrats to refocus back on, as you said, and jobs.
Well, John Boehner, I think he's having a lot of problems with his own party because he is making deals and other people in his party they're rejecting it. So what if everybody is rejecting, everybody wants their own deal? It sounds like this part of the party wants their own deal and that part of the party wants their own deal. How do you get around with all these deals? And some of them are, Harry Reid made a, fairly interesting, contribution. I think his was a very good deal. I think John Boehner, he had his own deal and it wasn't that bad. But they're getting rejected in their own party, not even the opposite party. Yes. We're talking about, this is the first time that I have seen in politics where their own party is getting, is really putting them down.
Yes, well,
how do you work with it?
Well, couple things. That's part of why you saw Obama in his speech last night take a page out of Reagan's book, which was to tell people to call their members of Congress or write to them and let them know that they want compromise and they want balance, and that he said, I believe, balance 6 times in his speech and compromise 7 times, and the latest I saw was that actually the switchboards were getting overheated because of all of this, and so he is trying very hard to bring to bear the pressure of the American people on, and he pointed the finger at the Tea Party. He was pretty clear in who he thought was responsible for this, and he's trying to bring that pressure to bear. So that's one approach of trying to get them in line.
What about, I want to ask you, we have still some little bit of time left. Our time goes so fast on this show. I would like to find out, former President Bill Clinton said, and this is really interesting. He said, if faced with default, he would single-handedly raise the debt ceiling using the 14th Amendment without any hesitation and force the courts, he says, and force the courts to stop me. And let me just explain to our audience that the 14th Amendment says the validity of the U.S. public debt shall not be questioned. The Treasury officials who served under Clinton, he said, commissioned legal research on the president's power to raise the debt ceiling without congressional approval. What do you think of this 14th Amendment? I know that Timothy Geithner, for some reason, he said he did some research on it, and it wasn't credible that he felt that the section is questionable and not credible. But Bill Clinton felt that his research was correct, and the president could do it without congressional support. What is your feeling about this?
Well, there's been some articles written that said that he absolutely should do that he has the power to save the republic from domestic and foreign catastrophes, and this would be one of those, fall in that category.
Right.
And Obama's response was interesting, that his attorneys had looked into it and that it wasn't a winnable argument, although I would not be surprised if that starts to change in the next few days, that it is something that a president can and there's been some historical precedent for that, and they point to often when Lincoln said that ended habeas corpus during the Civil War as part of his effort to win that war, that this is the role of the president and that this is a threat and that he should take that kind of a strong action. I don't think that Obama wants to be in that position. I think that would be a last resort. But
why would he take that position? To me, he's the president, and I think that sometimes I find that Obama always wants to, he's always looking, he compromise, and he comes from that background. First of all, he's a law professor, and he sees things a little bit differently. Where I can see Bill Clinton, I could see him absolutely, he wouldn't take any of this stuff that's going on. He would go right to it and do exactly what he said he was going to do. He would make that decision on his own.
Well, I think I agree with you that Clinton would have a little different approach during this whole process, perhaps. And Obama has always emphasized compromise and balance and being the adult, reasonable adult in the room, and he doesn't want to perhaps jettison that image on this issue. He has to consider, though, that if this bill does not come from Congress, and all spending bills technically come, not technically from the Constitution, come from the House of Representatives, are supposed to originate there, then he is in some ways letting them off the hook in a sense of having to vote for these difficult measures. And so I don't think that politically he would like to see that happen, certainly unless it became to an 11th hour kind of an issue. And just one last point is that on the other side, the flip side, and if I were sitting with him and giving him the advice, whoever people blame for this in the end, Obama will be held responsible for the economy. So if there is even a brief idea of default, he will be held responsible, even if he seems to be the one who's been willing to compromise more. He will have some blame in this whole situation.
You know, I always feel that I think Obama's always, I think he's sort of like a pleaser all the time. He's always pleasing this one and pleasing that way, and that's his personality. And I think what the American people are looking for is a president that takes charge more. I think Obama, my feeling is, and I've heard other people say the same thing, that he needs to make more decisions and just forget about being the good guy all the time. And and just do it. Do what the other presidents would do. They wouldn't take this from anybody. He needs to be a little bit more forceful and just do it. They may not like it in the beginning, but they'll learn to live with it.
Well, you're not the first to make that argument that he needs to be a little more decisive, get a little bit more angry in some ways. Some people suggested that. I think that is not his demeanor, and that is not something that he has run on, certainly in trying. He's said from the very beginning to change the tone in Washington, to allow for more compromise, and I think that he firmly believes that that is what is going to help him with the future elections and being perceived. If you look at the polls, his approval ratings are still higher, significantly, than the Democrats in Congress, and the Republicans in Congress are really at the bottom of the poll. So he's perceived as likable. He has about 45% approval ratings, and people are seeing him as being the more reasonable in this debate. And I think that is something that he believes will help him going forward.
But, nice guys finish last. Chuck Hagel just said something just recently on television. I was very impressed by what he said. And I was wondering what your opinion was. He said, are we trapped in a 20th century government structure trying to deal with 21st century challenges and issues and problems?
Well, that's a very insightful comment, and I would tend to agree, yes, that the nature of our government is designed to do nothing rather than to do too much. It's very easy to slow down legislation, to block it, to put a hold on it, to have a filibuster, to vote it down, to veto it, and that does often, I think, allow for things to move extremely slowly. There's reasons for that are certainly valid. In addition, there's so much money in the system, which would be a whole other discussion another day.
In the 20th century, we didn't have half of this. This is new. I mean, we have computers now that we didn't have. We have Twitter and and Facebook and all these things. So many different things that weren't then, and we're not facing, or we seem to be way back, in the Middle Ages, or and he said that we're not, our government isn't up to the 21st century challenges and issues, and our problems are different than when the Constitution was written.
But I think it's fair to say that when you have so much money and lobbying in Washington, and people have entrenched interests that do not want to be they don't want to get cut out of lose their tax credits or have to change their way of doing business if it's been pretty cushy. It's very hard to say we don't need these subsidies because we don't need so much corn or we don't need so much sugar or whatever issue, and let's give those subsidies to another startup kind of industry. That's very hard to do in Washington because people are always raising money, trying to win the next election, and that system impedes a lot of this innovation that I think Senator Hagel is talking about.
They want to get money from people on Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. And look, General Electric, who is, that makes millions or billions of dollars, doesn't pay any taxes. If they would collect from companies like that are not paying any taxes, we would have money to pay back, all the trillions of dollars that we owe. We wouldn't have to borrow it from people that are on Social Security, or we talk about grandma, or people that count on their Social Security checks, or count on their Medicare checks, or Medicaid checks, or militaries that count on their military checks, because our military, when they come out, they can't find jobs either. So, companies like General Electric, who don't pay any taxes, and they get in scot-free, and who the top of the CEO of the company, who is
Jeffrey Immelt.
Jeffrey Immelt, happens to be on the committee that serves the Obama administration. Now that makes absolutely no sense. What's going on with this type of situation?
Well, I think it needs to be clear that they pay taxes, but they have been able to, through working a lot of the loopholes and exceptions that are built into the tax code, to avoid paying a lot of taxes. But that is perfectly legal given the way the tax code works.
Yeah.
And so
we're not saying it's illegal,
right?
But it's legal, but it's not right. General Electric not paying taxes to the United States.
Well, but that's where you get into some of this debate that they were trying to hammer out, was closing some tax loopholes. That was one of the plans that they were talking about. Actually, one of Obama's shifting of his agenda was tax reform, which was the idea that it would lower everybody's corporate interest tax rates, but close certain loopholes that have been in the tax code for many, many years. And there was a significant amount of support for that, but a lot of people in Boehner's caucus particularly balked at wanting any kind of a revenue shift, even if in the end it would lower rates, but closing those loopholes proved to be quite unpopular to some members of Congress.
Now, Charles Krauthammer says, move money around and you've covered the debt service, and there is no default. And my goodness, we have 2 minutes to discuss, Charles,
all that.
All that? I can't believe it. What do you feel about that?
Well, the Washington Post had a very interesting piece.
You got to do it in 2 minutes.
In 2 minutes, they explained that the Treasury was going to bring in about $174 billion, and the U.S. owes, for the month of August, and the U.S. owes about $304 billion. So that difference there is about $134 billion, if my quick math is correct. And the question is, yes, you could put that towards debt service, but then that doesn't pay all of the other bills that the United States is obligated to pay, including Social Security payments, military service men and women, those kinds of people. So yes, you can move money around, and I'm sure that the Treasury will be trying to do that so that there will not be technically a default, but somebody will not get their money unless they pass a debt extension.
And what is your predictions of what's going to happen? With the last minute that we have, what is your predictions?
Well, everybody is still saying that there's going to be some kind of agreement. I believe that there will probably be an 11th hour agreement. Nobody will be very happy with it, and it will be a bitter pill to swallow. but they will pull it out at the 11th hour. That's my prediction for this
Or
time.
they may go in an extension.
They may pass a short-term
Short
extension.
Well, I want to thank you, Julie. You have been a very wonderful guest. You have enlightened us. You've talked about so many different things that a lot of our people and a lot of our guests and a lot of our audience, and myself included, really was struggling understanding the whole thing. And I'm wondering if we're understanding it, or how are they doing it in Washington? And I want to invite you back on the show. And I know you talk about women in the Supreme Court,
Yes.
and your predictions for the next election. I mean, I know you have a lot of different thoughts, and we need to hear from you. And I want to thank our audience for coming today. We have some studio audience today, and I want to thank you out there. And if there's any questions that you need to know, be sure to give us a call, give Julie a call, and she will answer all those questions that you've always been wanting to know. And I want to thank you again.
my pleasure.
As we sit here, we'll try to even think more of how we can really work the system together. And so I'm glad that you have some predictions. I have some predictions of my own.
We're done. Nice show.
Okay.